A federal judge in Montana has blocked a statewide ban on TikTok from going into effect next year. The move puts a stop to the first attempt in the U.S. for a full ban of the popular app, at least temporarily. Alexis Keenan joins us now with more. Alexis, this is a temporary victory for the app, but how is this likely to move forward?
Yeah, so this federal judge in Montana, he made this decision on this request for injunction, and it favors TikTok users in Montana as well as TikTok, the company itself, over Montana's legislature. And the legislature, what it was going to do was block both downloads and use of TikTok. That law was set to go into effect in the state in January. So the law, though, it was passed in May, and that was after the federal government, as well as 25 or more state governments, banned TikTok on government devices, and that was over national security concerns. And the worry there is that TikTok's owner, ByteDance, could help purportedly spy on Americans because it is subject to a Chinese law and then ultimately the Chinese government. Now, Montana argued that this law protects consumers by super access. What they said is that China's government had this overall overreaching access into all user accounts on TikTok, whether those are Americans or users across the world. TikTok and the users, for their part, they argued that the law, though, was unconstitutional. They said it violated their First Amendment protections to free speech, as well as the Commerce Clause, as well as Foreign Affairs clauses. But it really highlights, this decision does, the difficulty that governments have in facing these and addressing these concerns over user data being protected. Now, the U.S. federal government, it has already been in negotiations with TikTok to try to find a solution for this purported problem. But the status of those negotiations a bit unclear. In March, you go back earlier in this year, you had TikTok's CEO testifying before Congress about these concerns. Before that, you had an executive order by President Trump that failed. It demanded that TikTok take its U.S. entity and divest it to a U.S. company. You also have some legislation that's on the table that would give the Commerce Department the power to ban foreign technology that poses a national security threat. Now, it's important, though, when you're looking at this decision, to step back and see that the judge did leave some room. And in his writing on this decision, he said in the First Amendment analysis, it doesn't stop Montana or any other state, let's say, from trying to protect consumers. He said because the legislature, in writing this law, he said, used an axe to solve its professed concerns when it should have used a constitutional scalpel. So what he's saying there is he wants this to be more fine-tuned in order to even try to withstand this First Amendment scrutiny here. Akiko?
So, Alexis, does this mean that this specific case, at least this ruling, doesn't necessarily set a precedent for all the other efforts to try and ban the app?
So yes and no, because this is an injunction to just stop the law from taking effect. What it still requires is an analysis by the judge to look at the violations that are being alleged and say, would the plaintiffs who are bringing this case, would they succeed on the merits? That means, would they succeed on the underlying case? And this judge's decision is yes, that the plaintiffs would succeed. So it does perhaps set a precedent in terms of analysis, because if you have cases like this brought across the country, other judges could come to the same conclusion. They could come to a different conclusion. But it's also instructive for other plaintiffs who try to bring these cases, and defendants as well, legislatures, to try to craft the legislation differently so that potentially it could withstand this very difficult scrutiny that the First Amendment and some of these other constitutional challenges present.
Okay, certainly not going to be the only effort here to try and get the app banned, as we've seen a lot of pushback. Alexis Keenan, thanks so much for that.